Thank you, Sheila. Let's prepare to begin. We are on day 2 of the hearing and proposed amendments to the Conservation Commission regulations, docketed as 24683. This is the second opportunity to offer non-technical public comment. If you're in the room or on the platform, just know a few things. We're making a transcript, so I will ask you to spell your first and last name. And the commission rules require that all comment be offered under oath or affirmation. I will ask you to just offer oral comment once, no longer than 3 minutes. You may certainly submit whatever you'd like in writing if there is more to say than that. I have on the sheet that Mandy Sackett wants to comment during this time. Hello. Mr. Purvis, can I ask you to move? Good morning. Would you spell your first and last name, please? Make sure that's on. Say it again.
Amanda, Amanda Sackett, Sackett.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I swear.
Thank you. I'll start.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Mandy Sackett. I'm the New Mexico lead campaigner and a certified optical gas imaging thermographer for Earthworks. I'm trained to use a special infrared camera that allows me to visualize pollutants like methane from oil and gas facilities. As a new employee and thermographer for Earthworks, my first few trips have been really shocking. Last month, I spent time in the declining field of the San Juan Basin. It's eye-opening to see what managing a declining field actually looks like. These wells are broadly poorly maintained, and the frequency with which I found hydrocarbon emissions at the sites that we visited was really alarming. Many of them were next door to schools and houses. Over a few days, we visited 17 sites. 15 of those were low-producing wells. We found emissions due to possible noncompliance with air quality rules at 10 of those sites, and I reported them to NMED. We commonly saw thief hatch malfunctions on tank batteries, improperly functioning flares, repair issues with fittings in sump areas. I'll tell you about a few examples of what I saw. At one site near Counselor, I found 3 sources of emissions, of continuous emissions at just one site: the vent stack on the battery, the sump area, and a vent stack on the horizontal separator. This site is just 900 feet from a K-8 school that serves exclusively Navajo students. At another site in Kirtland, I found 2 emissions from a tank battery. There was an apparent thief hatch malfunction on the tank battery, and it was continually leaking emissions about 300 feet from a new neighborhood. According to OCD's database, that site had produced virtually no oil or gas since 2019. The thing is, as these sites become less productive, they keep polluting but produce less revenue, which makes it harder to self-fund cleanup and maintenance or start saving for well plugging. What we see in the field is proof that our current system is not working as it should. We have a backlog of wells leaking methane and toxic gases, and the cost of cleanup keeps falling on the public. Industry says the system is fine, but if it were, New Mexico wouldn't be sitting on thousands of inactive and orphaned wells and hundreds of millions of dollars in future plugging liability. As experts will lay out, our current bonding framework is not risk-based. It treats every operator the same, whether they manage 3 wells or 3,000, and it ignores the actual probability that a company will walk away. This rule doesn't target small operators. It targets risky behavior. Every operator, large or small, should obey the law and cover the costs of cleaning up their own mess. You can't say the system is working when you can literally see methane pouring into the sky like I can with my camera. Please adopt this rule and protect taxpayers, public health, and the climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sackett. The other person who wanted to speak this morning, Freddie Lopez. Mr. Lopez, are you in the room or on the platform? All right, he may join us later. Annie, let's see, did I see Annie Cook on the platform would like to offer comment? I think you can unmute yourself. There you are. You're not unmuted.
How about now?
Oh, terrific. Thank you. Would you spell your first and last name, please?
Yes, Annie, Annie, Cook, Cook.
Thank you. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. I'll start your time.
My name is Annie Cook, and I've been a resident of New Mexico since 1971 when I moved here from Kansas. New Mexico's home to me, and I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. Both of my sons were born here. My oldest graduated from UNM, as I did, and my youngest graduated from the School of Mining and Technology in Socorro. I am a master's prepared nurse who retired in 2013 from the VA in Albuquerque after 30 plus years of service. My husband of 33 years and myself own a home on the west side of Albuquerque, and we're totally invested in the land of enchantment. As retirees, my husband and I love to camp and enjoy the beauty of the land of enchantment. Our love of nature makes us advocates for keeping the environment pristine so we and our fellow New Mexicans can enjoy the beauty of New Mexico for years to come. Because of my commitment to the environment, I'm concerned about these regulations. I feel these regulations, especially increasing the assurance money required, will cripple the smaller producers of oil and gas, requiring them to cancel projects and possibly face bankruptcy. I know the regulations are meant to ensure that if a project is canceled, the site will be cleaned up. But if the company is forced to cancel projects or declare bankruptcy due to the imposition of these onerous regulations, we'll create the very situation that we are trying to avoid. Abandoned projects will create a snowball effect, causing job losses in the communities where they're located. And this will cause the loss of other businesses such as grocers, gas stations, and other retailers. And it's going to negatively affect employment and growth in our smaller communities. Additionally, the funding from the oil and gas industry provides 51% of the state budget for New Mexico. So losses in this industry will affect our entire state, and in particular, our educational system, which relies heavily on money from the oil and gas industry. So today, I'd like to urge you to consider my comments when you're voting on these regulations. And I want to thank you so much for letting me speak today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook. I see an FL. That might be Mr. Lopez.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Would you spell your first and last name, please?
My name is Freddie Lopez. My first name is spelled Freddie, and my last name Lopez is spelled Lopez.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. I'll start your time.
Thank you. My name is Freddie Lopez. I am 24 years old, and I have lived in New Mexico all my life. Raised here in Santa Fe. My dad is a tinsmith with a prestigious art gallery in downtown Santa Fe. And my mom is a stay-at-home mom. I was homeschooled right up until community college, and I graduated from the Santa Fe Community College with a high school equivalency, as well as an associate's degree in business administration. New Mexico is my home. Santa Fe is my home. And this is a place that in the future, when it's my time to go, I will be buried here and my kids will be buried here. I know how important the oil and gas industry is to our state. It is vital and essential for our economy as it's 51% responsible for the fruition of our economy. And as a proud alumni of the Santa Fe Community College, I have to say, education opens the door and brings up many opportunities for all New Mexicans, especially folks in my generation. And our schools are in trouble. We are ranked 50th and 51st nationwide. And the oil and gas industry is responsible for the funding of all of our educational institutions. It is very important. And to address the issues we have to act now. But if we implement these rules and regulations in place, not only will it harm small oil and gas producers on projects, but also it will harm our children and their future. Because if our schools are not funded, how can we address the issues that we are facing in our education institutions? So I urge you to please take my voice into consideration when you vote on these rules and regulations. If you believe in our children's future, if you believe in New Mexico's future, I kindly urge you to consider my voice when you make your final vote on these rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. I see another hand, MP. By the way, if you have dialed in using your phone, the way to raise your hand on the platform is to press *5. Oh, it's Marlene Parrott. Good morning. Can you unmute yourself? Sister? Sister Marlene?
I think we heard yesterday to use, use Control-Shift-M to unmute if you're having trouble.
Thank you, Commissioner Bloom. Sister Marlene, it looks like you're unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Would you spell
Um,
your first and last name, please?
Marlene, Marlene Perrotte, Perrotte.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
I'll start your time.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the New Mexico Oil Conservation Commission. I am Marlene Parrott, a Catholic Sisters of Mercy, a member of New Mexico El Paso Interfaith Power and Light, and of the Partnership for Earth Spirituality. As a woman of faith, I would offer the moral imperatives of the oil and gas corporations that they must be held responsible for posting realistic bonds before they drill. Caring for and protecting Holy Mother Earth's community is a sacred trust and an ethical imperative. Right now, oil and gas corporations in New Mexico can drill as many wells as they want, yet put up a tiny fraction of the money needed to clean them up. I personally have visited the Permian Basin many, many times and experienced abandoned wells, leaking oil pipes, leaking toxins such as methane, etc. Letting wells leak to protect profits today puts New Mexicans' health at risk. We can't afford delay in cleanup. It is our moral responsibility to ensure that corporations who drill these wells must clean them up. It is an outrage that these corporations take their profits back to Houston and Wall Street and leave us New Mexicans with the mess of cleanup. The Oil and Gas Corporation should cover the full cost of cleaning up after itself, not New Mexicans' families. We need modern rules to match the reality of modern drilling. The bonding system is vastly inadequate, covering only 2 to 10% of total liability. I support strong bonding rules to protect New Mexico's water, land, and air, her health and future. We need a responsible energy policy. Better practices must include full accountability. We cannot afford underfunded risks. It's time to fix the rules so the corporations that drill are the ones who must clean up. Thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sister. Is there anyone else on the platform who would like to offer public comment during this public comment session? Our next public comment session is at 4 p.m. today. That comment session is one of several during which we will have an interpreter between Spanish and English. Anyone else for this morning? All right, thank you. We'll return then to the technical case. Mr. Cloutier, I think you said you had a preliminary matter to bring up.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Your Honor, this is Mr. Maxwell on the platform. I can't hear him.
I apologize, Mr. Maxwell. I was just saying that we're going straight to Sir rebuttal with the second witness, which we're not objecting to. We thought we were going to be discussing that more before we did it. As long as we're doing that with the technical witnesses, sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander, no problem with it. I think Mr. Suazo and I probably have to reevaluate witness times and make sure we're okay with it. I would not anticipate for my purposes that if I'm adding any time, it would be more than 10 or 15 minutes, but I just wanted to bring that up and get your thoughts, please, Madam Hearing Officer.
Yes, you probably noticed yesterday what Ms. Fox did with the witness, which was to be very specific in her identification of the precise rebuttal testimony. The witness was Sir rebutting.
She did
So
it.
long as you're doing that.
That's fine.
All right.
We'll be happy to do that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fox?
Yet no objection. The hearing scheduling order provided for having direct rebuttal and Sir all in one, all in sequence. So that was what was contemplated in the order.
Thank you. Anything else before we return to Mr. Purvis? No? All right. Thank you so much. Let's see. Are you kicking us off this morning with questioning, Mr. Cloutier? Oh, I'm sorry. Haha. We need to finish this Sir rebuttal first.
Yep.
Haha. That's right. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Hearing
Nykiel.
Officer.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Purvis. We'll continue with your Sir rebuttal testimony. What are your high-level observations of industry's rebuttal testimony?
Thank you for the question. There are three primary high-level observations of what's there and one about what is not. In the rebuttal testimony offered by other witnesses about my testimony, there were objections to the underlying data used in my work, objections to the value of the notion of holdback, and objections to perceived disrespect and bias. There were not, however, substantive objections to my calculations or the conclusions from those the conclusions that are built on those quantifications. Now, there were a number of other arguments raised in this rebuttal testimony, which, like the direct testimony of other witnesses, I found spurious and unhelpful, but I've not addressed those here. So to the extent I've not addressed an issue raised in rebuttal testimony, it should not be assumed that I agree it's valid.
NMOGA witnesses Ms. Felix and Mr. Arthur claim in their rebuttal testimony on pages 8 and 9, respectively, that you advised the New Mexico Legislative Finance Committee during the creation of its report, Policy Spotlight Orphan Wells. Did you advise the LFC on its work, and how did their work affect your own?
I did not advise the LFC on their work. And I did not rely on their conclusions in the formation of my own. So there is no circular reference where I'm citing myself indirectly.
Namoga witnesses Ms. Felix, Mr. Arthur, and Mr. McGowan opine in their rebuttal testimony at pages 18 through 19, 17 through 20, and 3 respectively, that the OCD's master orphan well spreadsheet is foundational to your characterization of the issue with orphan wells, and that it exaggerates the scope of the issue of orphan wells. What is your response?
Of the 29 exhibits I prepared, most of which are quantitative, the Master Orphan Well Spreadsheet, or MOSS, affects 3 in part. And none of those 3 is the Master Orphan Well Spreadsheet used to justify the extent of the orphan well issue. If I may share my screen now. This slide and the 3 that follow show all of the exhibits I prepared in my testimony. The rebuttal testimony exhibits are outlined as the first in the second row. On this page, where I'm setting the stage of the large-scale issue, the Master Orphan Well Spreadsheet does provide the sole source of information for the histogram on the first part of line 2. The Orphan Well Spreadsheet affects 1 column of the 2 tables in the lower right, in the exhibit in the lower right, and on the 3rd page back, the Master Orphan Well Spreadsheet is part of the evidence of the nature of the companies that are orphaned. So when I talk, however, about the nature of the orphan well issue, it's this group of slides where I quantify the application of the definition of marginal wells against empirical data on economic limits.
Namoga witness Mr. McGowan argues in his rebuttal testimony at pages 23 through 24 that the Vertex report discussed in your testimony is speculative and non-reproducible because stakeholders cannot audit it. What is your response?
So the Vertex report, which was published in March of 2021, affects only one graphic. That's the upper right, the second and the first line here, used to set context. I was able to obtain the report from 2 sources, one of which being the company itself. And the company, when they delivered the report to me, told me they had also given a report to IPAM expert Dr. R. Scott. But it's a matter of public record. The report runs 91 pages, 31 tables. In the middle, in the context of the report, 4 appendices. It is a comprehensive, quantitative, detailed analysis. Now, the idea that it's speculative is misplaced. It is a class 5 category of cost estimate. Now, there is a formal taxonomy for the quantification, or the classification rather, of cost estimates. And class 5 is the most broad. It's meant for strategic purposes, which is exactly the kind of application that we have here. It may be imprecise, but there's no evidence that it is inaccurate.
Namoga witness Mr. McGowan claims in his rebuttal testimony at pages 21 through 22 that Well Database, the data source you use to provide analysis of applicants' proposed rules, is a less reliable and less widely adopted data source in the industry, and therefore should be independently validated and compared to Mr. McGowan's preferred data source. What is your response?
There are about 8 companies that offer the same fundamental service with the same fundamental product. They obtain data from the regulators in each state in digital form, and they repackage it in a more accessible manner to subscribers. Now, there are 3 large companies that offer enterprise level solutions. One of those he mentions is Inveris. The other he mentions is IHS. That company no longer exists. It's now called S&P Global. But S&P Global will not allow their data to be used in any way in public. The variety of competitors in this market have different offerings depending on the scope of data that they have collected and the degree to which they add additional analysis of their own. In this case, Well Database is a mid-tier offering. It uses the same core data downloaded digitally from the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, in this corporation, Oklahoma Conservation Division, in this case. And that core data is what I have relied upon.
Mr. Purvis, you intended to say New Mexico. Yep.
Yes, I certainly did not mean Oklahoma. I'm sorry. What's more, I used, that was only part of the data I used. I did access the OCD's application programming interface directly to get information directly from the state, and I quality controlled the information as I used it. Well Database is a widely accepted and used tool. I find perfectly acceptable for the way I've used it.
Namoga witness Mr. McGowan claims in his rebuttal testimony at page 21 that your manual corrections to the data introduced substantial subjectivity into the data sets. What is your response?
I gave the example in my testimony that operators had sometimes reported 36 days of operations in a month. It's hard to imagine that there's any way I could correct 36 days in a month and make it less accurate. But in fact, I can tell you that when I made the corrections, there were very little corrections that needed to be made. And if memory serves, the change was a reduction in the number of marginal wells affected by about 0.1%. It's a trivial issue.
To which of your exhibits did rebuttal testimony take issue with, your calculations or conclusions?
On this slide, or in these slides, I've arranged my testimony in order of key points. The first points are that it's a very large issue, decommissioning is, and it's much larger than just downhole plugging. No disagreement from them. The second line demonstrates that there's a high side contingency element to the cost of decommissioning. All agree on that. We all agree that costs have increased and they continue to increase. Some disagreement on the application of holdback, but no disagreement that there are about 63,000 wells in the state that currently, as we continue to drill, that will need to be plugged. No disagreement that production is, except for horizontal wells, well past its peak. No disagreement that the majority of wells are strip room. No disagreement that the definitions apply to a small fraction of wells that are actually marginal. No doubt that the definitions are conservative by comparison. No questions about the distribution of the entities in the industry. No opposition that there are 3 separate clusters, one of companies, one of liabilities, and one of production. No disagreement that the number of wells has decreased, but of course that came out in rebuttal, wouldn't necessarily know that yet. So there is a disagreement in a qualitative sense about the significance of call it the bottom 90% of operating companies. But in terms of quantification and themes, no substantive disagreement.
Namoga witnesses Mr. Arthur, Mr. McGowan, and IPAM witness Mr. Winchester disagree in their rebuttal testimony at pages 20 through 21, 28, and 16 through 17, respectively, with your characterization of marginal wells. When you talk about marginal wells as categorized by applicants' proposed rules, do you mean the same thing?
No, we don't. I do not observe any location in the testimony of other opposing experts that quantify the number of wells under the definition of marginal as proposed. Instead, the discussion is about the marginal wells under the generic meaning of that term. I'm showing now my exhibit 47 with some annotations on top of it. These are the 22,000 vertical wells in the Permian Basin. The color coding indicates whether or not they are defined as marginal. The dark blue is defined as marginal. The purple would do not qualify as marginal, but will need some sort of address. The red lines indicate the actual historical economic limit of production. What you see is that there are a large number of wells, many more wells that are within the window of the end of their economic life, are producing at low rates and low profit margins that do not qualify for the additional financial assurance and therefore are not defined marginal. So to the extent that other experts refer to marginal wells in the generic sense, they're talking about a much larger number of wells than are affected by the defined term of marginal.
Namoga witness Mr. Arthur disagrees in his rebuttal testimony at pages 20 through 21 with your testimony that there is a likelihood that marginal wells present a greater risk of orphaning. What is your response?
My testimony is not that all marginal wells will be orphaned. My point is that they are barely making any money by definition, and the defined marginal are making even less money. And therefore they they represent more liability than asset on an average and increase the risk to the portfolio as a whole. Not that everyone is an orphan, not that every well past holdback will be orphaned, but that the risk increases.
Namoga witness Mr. Arthur argues in his rebuttal testimony at pages 86 through 87 that your testimony conflates inactive wells with problem wells. What is your response?
I don't believe I said, and I certainly did not mean to imply, that all inactive wells are problem wells. That would not be an accurate thing to say. Instead, what I tried to say is that inactive wells have a higher incidence of difficulties. And the longer a well stands idle, the more likely it is to suffer some sort of mechanical deterioration and failure. My point is not that, as he seems to think, that all inactive wells are problem wells. My point is that the average risk increases.
IPAM witness Mr. Arscott and Namoga witness Mr. McGowan claim in their rebuttal testimony at pages 1 through 4 and 25 through 28 respectively that the holdback concept is not a reliable measure of the value of oil and gas wells or the likelihood that they will become orphaned. What is your response?
They do argue that holdback is not a measure of fair market value. I'm looking now at showing a demonstrative of my applicant's exhibit 38. And as I intended to say yesterday, if a property at the point of holdback forward, the operator's trading dollars. If he makes a purchase, then the purchase price is lost in a dollar to dollar basis. But I'm not talking about this as a concept for what you should pay. There is no disagreement that profits are high in the beginning, low at the end. No disagreement that when it stops producing, it's left as a liability, except for some contingent possibility of something improving. There's no disagreement that the point of holdback as defined does exist. There is a point in time when the cash flow undiscounted is zero, and at the same time that present value is positive. The argument goes that it's not a fair market value, and indeed it's not offered. Fair market holdback is not offered as an alternative fair market value, and it's not offered as a prescribed strategy. And what's more, it's not used in the rules in any way. Instead, it is offered as a yardstick to characterize the contours of the future cash flow. It's offered as a planning tool, a baseline from which to figure out how you will accomplish what is required. If I tell you that, by analogy, if I tell you that my cousin, as a senior in high school, had a 19-inch neck, you'd know he was a big boy. But you wouldn't know whether he's fat or strong. If I told you that he had a 36-inch waist and a 54-inch chest, then you would know that he is strong. That second yardstick provides a significant measure of the character, the contours of, and then that gives us a basis about what to expect. You would not be surprised to know that my cousin was the strongest high school senior in the state of Texas, that he was drafted to play for Nebraska the year after they won the national championship. Holdback is a useful planning tool.
Namoga witness Mr. McGowan argues in his rebuttal testimony at page 25 that the holdback concept is not an accepted industry practice. What is your response?
So holdback is, in fact, a variation of a well-established economic yardstick called return on investment and a variation of the most basic economic yardstick called payout. But defined and named as such, holdback is only a couple of years old, and I am the one who assigned that name and pointed out its significance. It is under discussion, has been under discussion within the relevant professional societies as something to be officially endorsed in the current revisions of the PRMS. But in the meantime, the Society of Petroleum Engineers has published it in their journal of Petroleum Technology. I've spoken to dozens of organizations, including an invitation to the National Stripper Well Association. And last year, the society chose the topic for presentation in their distinguished lecture tour, where we presented it in about half a dozen countries around the world.
IPAM witnesses Mr. Cantrell and Mr. Hannigan refer in their rebuttal testimony at pages 8 and 5, respectively, to the following statement in your direct testimony, applicants exhibit 30 at page 44, where you state, "At this point, I cannot say precisely how many companies are not prepared for the increased accountability, how each will exercise the range of options available to them, or how many will go out of business. But I can say that the companies at risk are the ones whose loss will be missed the least." What is your response? And I apologize. IPAM witnesses refer to that statement and claim that you have a bias and contempt for small operators. What is your response?
I am so sorry that my testimony gave offense. The statement is harsh, frank, to the point of being harsh. And I'm sorry for that. Let me try again. Statistically speaking, the small operators contribute a small amount to the state as a whole, and my evidence substantiates those figures.
IPAM witness Mr. Winchester and Namoga witness Mr. McGowan claim in their rebuttal testimony at pages 16 and 13, respectively, that your testimony shows that the aim of this rulemaking is to drive small operators out of business more than to provide financial assurances to New Mexico taxpayers. What is your response?
So I can't testify as to motivations of individuals who crafted the proposal. What I can say is I feel no bias towards small operators any more than I feel bias towards large operators. What I'm concerned about is, as people have testified, operators who sully the name of the industry and do not bear their legal, longstanding, well-known responsibilities. I don't have patience for that. But I'm not aware of any bias.
IPAM witness Mr. Hannigan identified in his rebuttal testimony at page 5 a quote from your company's webpage that states, in part, "I believe the world needs less oil and gas, not more." Mr. Hannigan claims that based on this quote, it proves your perspective is fundamentally at odds with the purpose of the OCC and the Oil and Gas Act. What is your response?
I have stated on my website that our firm is committed to a net zero policy based on my personal understanding and conviction about the social cost of burning hydrocarbons. That same statement goes on to say that I will continue to work with operators to maximize and optimize ongoing existing sources of supply, which is the question here. The question before the commission is not about the social cost of carbon. It is about how to deal with existing sources of supply.
Namoga witnesses Mr. McGowan and Mr. Arthur claim in their rebuttal testimony at pages 22 and 73, respectively, that your testimony establishing the average cost for OCD to decommission a well in New Mexico is wrong because it's not based on randomized nor representative data. Did you prepare an analysis of their claim?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to pass out, Ms. Fox will pass out, and would you please scroll to the relevant slide in your presentation that's been marked Applicants Exhibit 85.
Sure.
And And I'll note that applicants uploaded this to the rulemaking shared file folder on October 15th.
Okay. While she's passing that out, let me first address the idea that randomized is not the proper measure of representativeness. Orphaning and well costs are not random. The question is one of representativeness. And I see two dimensions to question the representativeness. The first is the basins from which the sample comes. As I said in my direct, 71% of the wells covered by the new rules exist in the Permian Basin. The OCD's experience covers includes about 90% wells from the Permian, so they're and about 20% from the San Juan Basin. But my rebuttal testimony shows that by two separate measures, the difference in median central expected costs in the San Juan and the Permian basis differ only by 15 or 20%. So to the extent that the sample is not representative, it's unrepresentative by 15 or 20%, and that difference is within that 15 or 20% is a difference of 15 or 20%. By contrast, this is by far the best available data to make the rule.
Mr. Purvis, did you also prepare an additional analysis to address Mr. McGowan and Mr. Arthur's rebuttal testimony at pages 22 and 73 respectively, where they disagree with your use of the division's average cost to decommission a well?
Yes. I did write in my direct testimony that
pardon me, Mr. Purvis, I just want to identify that. Would you please scroll to the relevant slide, and what we passed out includes applicants exhibit 86, which applicants also uploaded to the rulemaking shared file folder on October 15th. And is this your analysis?
Well, first, let me talk about 85 because I forgot to do that a minute ago.
Please.
In my direct testimony, I conceded that the selection of wells chosen to be plugged by the OCC, by the OCD, may be biased towards wells with a higher contingency. I said may, not was, because I thought that was a possibility. In Sir rebuttal, I have examined that question with two analyses. The first is here. The top part of Exhibits 85 summarizes what the OCD has said publicly about their prioritization scheme. It involves two layers of prioritization. First, one on risk, and second, one on efficiency. The bullet list identify many of the 30 variables that go into the priority. Only a few of those pertain directly to the cost of decommissioning, the cost of downhole plugging, rather. Instead, that's prioritized on things like proximity to occupied structures, proximity to agricultural areas, proximity to water supply wells, and proximity to threatened or endangered species, which have no bearing on downhole costs. So between the nature of the priority scheme and the overlay of efficiency, we would not necessarily expect to see higher cost wells prioritized. Now, that theory can be tested with one set of data that exists in the master orphan well spreadsheet, and that's what the bar chart shows. For the nearly 300 wells orphaned by Ridgway, Arizona, the spreadsheet shows the priority number assigned by the OCD. The lower the number on the left represents lower priority, and the higher number on the right represents higher priority. The gray, all of the bars represent the full population of wells to which a priority is assigned. And the average across the 300 wells is a priority score of 35.8, call it 36. The wells, the subset that are marked in shades of blue, represent the first round of wells which were plugged by the OCD. And we see that the average priority score was 33.7. 34. There's practically no difference between the average of the full population and the initial wells, the first priority wells plugged by the commission. Interestingly, we also see in this sample an average estimated cost of $156,000, an actual cost of $225,000, and an average overrun of $44,000. All of that, and which are consistent with the averages that we've seen in other places. So this one example suggests that there is no bias by the prioritization scheme. You asked me also about Exhibit 86.
And before we turn there, just to clarify, would you repeat the average overrun? I think you mentioned it was 44,000, but.
I should have taken a Benadryl last night. The average overrun was 44%.
Thanks. And yes, we had passed out and shared applicant's exhibit 86, which had been uploaded on October 15th to share file folder. Is that your analysis?
Yes, this is another analysis I prepared to test whether or not the prioritization scheme of the OCD creates a bias towards high contingency wells. The bottom line is no. Well, this represents that the wells plugged by the OCD, for which we have both by well estimates beforehand and actual costs after, over about the last 3 years. Now, during those 3 years, the cost itself, the baseline cost, was increasing rapidly. So I can't compare on the basis of cost alone. Instead, I've looked at the overrun. The solid black dashed line represents no overrun. The cost came in at the end of the day exactly as predicted, as estimated. The red dashed line represents an overrun of 100%, a double. Now, the Ridgeway example is shown in hot pink on the right. And what we see is that the very first wells that they plugged did have higher overruns, but the majority of the wells were consistent with the overall theme, the overall average. Similarly, energy acumen, shown in blue just to the left, represents the first wells in the priority scheme for decommissioning their wells. I find the name ironic for a company that orphaned their wells, but they do see the very first well is a high side, an overrun. And there's one or two other wells in the first batch, but most of the wells in that first batch are average. And the highest overrun that exists for that operator's orphaned wells is the last one that's plugged. In the case of M&M, BIA, Leaseholder, and Flare, small operators, in all those, the cases you see there are the first wells that were chosen to be plugged. Again, we don't see a high contingency pervasively at the front. Now, Blue Sky is a package of wells done about the middle of the program of decommissioning all their wells. And we do see some high overruns there in the middle. And the case of Canyon, this batch of wells you see here represents towards the tail end of the overall program of plugging their wells. And what we see is that the highest overrun among the Canyon wells was the last. So this set of samples does not show a pattern of high contingency overrun, high overruns in the early wells. And those two are the best pieces of evidence that I have to test the theory, and both indicate a lack of bias towards high contingency.
IPAM witness Mr. Hannigan asserts in his rebuttal testimony at page 4 that, quote, nothing in Mr. Purvis's Exhibit 35 reflects drilling, nor does well count or horizontal well percentage correspond to company size, end quote. What is your response?
He has not correctly read my exhibits. Apologize to scoot back here. Uh, in my exhibit 35, as well as 36, 37, and a rebuttal exhibit. I look at multiple measures. About 35, 36, and 37 all include a measure of new production, which is described specifically as new drilling.
IPAM witnesses Mr. Cantrell and Mr. Hannigan argue in their rebuttal testimony at pages 8 and 5 respectively that your testimony about the impact of applicants' proposed rules is limited to analysis of well count and production levels and misses the indirect economic effects of small operators. What is your response?
So any sort of economic activity does have a direct impact, an indirect impact, and an imputed impact where the echoes of the economic activity are circulating through the economy. The economic impact of oil and gas operations of all sizes is in direct proportion to the revenue, which is the production, and in direct proportion to the costs as measured by number of wells. So to the extent that, so I have not measured economic impact directly. I have measured the primary drivers of economic impact, and I've measured those for both large and medium small and small operators.
More specifically, IPAM witness Mr. Hannigan asserts in his rebuttal testimony at page 4 that, quote, Mr. Purvis ignores the wells drilled by small operators like Monzano and Armstrong Energy. In fact, the Permian Basin remains the nationwide leader in vertical well rig counts, with 80% of vertical rigs nationwide in 2024 and 50% of vertical rigs in 2025 so far. Discounting the development potential by smaller operators drilling vertical wells ignores a large percentage of the population of operators in New Mexico, end quote. Did you prepare an analysis of Mr. Hannigan's assertion?
Yes, I did.
Would you please scroll to the relevant slide in your presentation? We have already passed out applicants exhibit 87, which applicants uploaded to the rulemaking shared file folder on October 15th. Is this your analysis?
Yes, it is.
And what does it say?
So I appreciate you asking about this because it's emblematic of the noise and hand waving without quantification that's systemic through the opposition to the rules. Mr. Hannigan says 80% of vertical wells. The Permian is the concentration of vertical wells, and that it's 80% and 50%, which makes it sound like a lot. His footnote shows that the 80% is out of 10 rigs nationally, and the 50% is out of 12 rigs nationally. What I've tried to do on this exhibit is show a more meaningful quantitative analysis. This is the same source of data. It's the Baker Hughes rig count. And it shows all of the rigs active in the Permian Basin as a whole. On the left side of the page is the Permian in Texas, and on the right side, the Permian in New Mexico. The three lines represent the rig count drilling different kinds of wells. The black line is horizontal. The light gray line is the least important, least significant, directional, and the purple line is vertical wells. And what we see first is that there are many more rigs, both vertical and horizontal, in Texas than there are in New Mexico. So the citation to the Permian is misleading in that way. But more to the point, over the last 2 years in Texas, the proportion of rigs drilling vertically has ranged from only 1.1 to 4.1% of the rigs. And in New Mexico, the rig count drilling for vertical wells over the last 2 years has averaged between 0 and 2.8% of the rigs. So for all the ballyhoo about the significance and importance and all the ballyhoo about my ignorance, a quantification of the data validates my conclusion that vertical well drilling is very small.
Madam Hearing Officer, this concludes Mr. Purvis's testimony. He stands available for cross-examination and questions from the commission.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cloutier, are you beginning the questioning?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Good morning, Mr. Purvis.
Good morning, sir.
I'd like to jump right into the data and let me screen share with you. I believe in your rebuttal, you identified Exhibit 77 as one of the exhibits which you used the master orphan spreadsheet to prepare. Is that correct?
1 second.
Let me share my screen here. Sorry.
I'm trying to double check your number.
Mr. Everhart, could I ask you to share 77? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble here. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And the master orphan spreadsheet is Exhibit 55 in the Welk exhibits.
I'll take your word for it.
There's about 1,800 wells listed on the master orphan wells spreadsheet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And only about 310 of them have plugging cost data, correct?
If memory serves, that's about right.
Yeah. And I'll confess, operator error, I got 303 one time and 312 the next time. So I don't want to give you a precise figure. And you used in the spreadsheet.
You're sharing now.
I'm sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Stop at the top.
Good, good. All right. The spreadsheet itself, let me fully minimize. So the spreadsheet is columns. You're using the data in columns BI here, estimated plugging cost, and BK. BK actual plugging cost.
No.
Exhibit, no?
No.
Which ones are you using to prepare Exhibit 77? I'll scroll over.
If memory serves, it is estimated plugging cost and the column at the far right called total plugging costs.
Okay. All right. And so basically we have approximately 13% of the wells listed on the master orphan wells spreadsheet with actual plugging costs and total plugging costs in them, correct? The 300.
I don't think that math is either right or relevant.
Okay.
So assuming it is 300 out of 1,800, it would be about 16%.
16%. Okay.
But more to the point, the spreadsheet includes wells deep into the history of the operations of the program, whose experience are much less relevant to the current rulemaking in 2025.
All right. And that's why you pared it down from the 300 or so to the number on Exhibit 77, which was 182.
That is not the reason I pared it down.
Okay.
The footnote on Exhibit 77 explains the choice. So there were about 300 that had cost estimates. I used 182 of those because I excluded cost estimates that were clearly not specific to individual wells. So when I observed that the same estimate down to the dollar was applied to multiple wells, I deemed that not to be a reliable per well estimate.
All right. So for instance, if there were a bunch of ones that were estimated $150,000 and in a row, I think I can find that.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
All right.
I'll stop sharing. I'm having trouble. Just search the estimated column for $150,000. You should get around line 200.
Okay, what column?
estimated? Just select 100 and. Nope. All right. It's not relevant. See, we've got 182 wells that you've selected. You'd agree, and you've testified that about 5% of the wells historically have been plugged by the OCD and 95% by industry.
I don't recall testifying to that fact.
Page 10 of your direct historic, most wells to date have been plugged by industry, not by public funds.
Yes, I do agree with that.
And then page 34 of your direct, historically 5% of U.S. onshore wells documented as plugged were orphan wells plugged by state agencies.
Nationally, yes, 5%.
And you heard Mr. Alexander testify yesterday about the LFC report concluding the same thing in New Mexico, that about 5% was plugged.
I did hear the testimony yesterday.
All right. And you don't think that testimony was unreliable, do you?
I'm happy to accept for discussion that 5% are plugged by the state.
So we're taking a percent of exhibit 55, and which is a small percent of plugging costs in New Mexico historically, and coming up with your figures for estimated plugging cost, correct?
The data that is available is a small percentage of what has been done. It remains the best data by far.
The best data you could find.
The best data that exists in the public domain, including the disclosures by other experts in this case.
All right. You testify on page 5 of your direct, these rules are necessary because the nature of oil and gas economics in concert with New Mexico's existing rules create little obligation that ensures operators are planning for decommissioning, and because existing incentives favor delaying decommissioning and ultimately increase the risk of orphaning. That sound like your testimony?
I have not verified it, but yes, that does sound right.
All right. Mr. Alexander testified yesterday about his work at Southwestern and how they would try to exceed regulatory standards. Do you believe Southwestern is some sort of outlier in the industry?
I have not formed an opinion on that.
All right. Would you agree that operators face other incentives, not just financial assurance, to plug wells?
Some operators do, some operators do not.
What about, for instance, the threat of litigation? Is that an incentive to plug wells?
The threat of litigation is more effective on some companies than on others. Okay. It can be a deterrent. It is more effective on some than others.
And what about the threat of regulatory action, such as pulling your ability to transport oil or gas in the state of New Mexico? Is that an incentive to plug wells?
You know, litigation, I think, has been rare, but I don't know of any instance where a company has lost the right to operate on account of this. Maybe just I haven't looked, but I don't. In theory, I suppose it could be, but in practice, I don't know that it is.
Do you know if the OCD has authority in its toolbox of enforcement mechanisms to pull an operator's ability to transport oil or gas?
I do not know.
Okay, or its authority to operate?
I couldn't say one way or the other what the laws are.
All right. You criticized Mr. George Sharp's testimony that most companies are responsible and plug their wells, and that it's hard to envision bad actors who let their wells languish changing their behavior. On page 7 and 8 of your rebuttal testimony, as I quote, pure opinion, subjective, anecdotal, and not a suitable basis for a multi-billion-dollar risk.
Please remind me what line you're reading on page 7.
I'm reading from starting on line 20 of page 7 to line 3 of page 8.
Okay, thank you.
I get that accurate?
Yes, you did read it correctly.
Thank you. However, your own testimony bears out, Mr. Sharp, that 95% of wells are getting plugged by industry. Responsible companies are plugging historically, correct?
I don't think that's an accurate characterization of the situation. Most importantly is the fact that past is not prologue. The industry in New Mexico has gone through a life cycle. And in particular, in the last 20 years, while production has been declining, oil and gas prices have tripled, quadrupled, and quintupled at various points in time. And meanwhile, costs have increased. The point is that the current depleted state of wells in New Mexico are not well reflected by the historical operations. And the 95% certainly should be higher, but is not representative of what should be expected in the future.
Okay. But it's what's happened, correct?
That is what's happened.
And he indicates that that he doesn't expect bad actors to change their behavior based on this rulemaking, correct? And you indicate that that's speculative or subjective, correct?
He does opine that he does not expect bad actors to change their behavior.
So I'm going to share with you if I can. I am not good at this, am I? We have it. You familiar with Mr. Winchester's testimony that on the OCD Master Orphan Well list, about 75% of the population is concentrated in 10 operators? The Canos, the Ridgeways, the Canyons, the same people we just looked at in your exhibit 86?
I do not recall that part of his testimony. I did prepare a similar analysis in my direct testimony to show that the concentration in the larger companies of hundreds of wells do contribute a disproportionate number of the overall orphan wells.
And you don't have any reasonable basis to tell this commission that any of those companies are going to change their behavior based on this proposed rulemaking, do you? They're going to post bonds or start plugging wells?
Let's clarify for just a second for the sake of answering your question. When you ask about bad actors, do you mean bad intent with bad outcomes, bad outcomes with good intent, or something else?
Well, it's Mr. Sharp's testimony, so I'm in addition to I'm asking the questions, I'm not Mr. Sharp. So, but how about you talked about the people who sully the reputation of the industry, the people who don't comply earlier this morning.
There are certainly a group of people who can be characterized as bad actors based on their bad intentions. The Boomhauer article describes this as the judgment proof problem, as it's known in economics, where a company does not have to suffer the consequences of its bad choices. It can go bankrupt and the owners can go on just fine. And as the rules now stand, there is a moral hazard embedded. The financial incentives are not aligned with they create a disincentive to do what's right. The CEO in Fort Worth told me just a couple months ago, he said, I'd love to do what's right, but it must make economic sense. The folks with bad intentions who own wells will still be able to execute their bad intentions because they already own the wells. Other parts of the rules will create a layer of protection against bad intentions. But there's a second question here, and that's one of bad outcomes. Good, well-intended operators who, for one reason or another, have not made adequate preparations for their ultimate liability. Now, to be clear, this rulemaking does not change the ultimate liability, the ultimate responsibility. Those are well-known, long-standing, have been since decades before I entered the industry. It does, however, change the accountability. And to the extent a well-meaning operator has not made adequate preparation, the rulemaking could change part of the outcome from the from the perspective of the state.
It's a big could, isn't it?
I have not tried to quantify the answer to that question.
Doesn't the commission have to do that sitting here? We've got this promise of a rulemaking of post bonding. This is a good thing and will ultimately protect the taxpayer. How do we quantify how the taxpayer is going to be protected by this rulemaking?
The most direct evidence that I've seen on this actually comes from Dr. Arscott. In his figure 9, exhibit 9 to his direct testimony, he quantifies what he believes the incremental bonding will be. And his estimate, if you multiply the number of companies by the average bond, is 1.9 billion. So if he's right that the incremental rulemaking will create $1.9 billion worth of financial security, then it's a great deal of protection.
So you think Dr. Arscott is predicting what the response of industry is going to be, the operators are going to be to this? That's how you understand his testimony?
I do not understand him to have opined on what each operator will elect among the 4 options that they have.
And those options would be plug.
Plug is the least attractive of the 4 options. So an operator faced with a dilemma of an increased bonding responsibility could just get rid of the wells to someone else, bankruptcy, or they can do one of 4 things. They can improve production so that it's no longer required. They could continue as is, even if it's at a loss. They can put the well in temporary abandonment, or they could plug. Of those 4 options, the least attractive is plugging. All of the other options are less costly in the base case scenario. The only time that plugging becomes competitive with the other options is when the third-party bonding agency decides that the operator is a bad risk. And the third party, not the OCD, the third party requires of the operator a collateral. Now, in that situation, the collateral could be as much as $150,000 of cash. But that is weighed against the cost of plugging, removal, remediation, and restoration, which we've done, plus the overhead costs, which are in most cases more. So among the options, plugging is the least attractive in the large majority.
But
situation.
Plugging is an option. An operator who is sitting here on the effective date of this regulation with a marginal well, 10 marginal wells, let's put it that way.
Okay.
They've got the option to bond, whether they temporarily abandon or just continue to produce, correct? This is at the rulemaking.
And to be clear, when you say marginal, you mean defined marginal, not.
I'm talking about marginal under the rulemaking.
Okay,
We're
so 100% of
living
their
in a
wells.
universe where the rulemaking is here.
Right.
They've got the option to bond those wells. They've got the option to produce those wells because they're already qualified as marginal on the effective date of the rulemaking. And bond and produce, they've got the option to plug and abandon, or they've got the option to do neither and put themselves in the regulatory crosshairs of the OCD, correct?
Yes. They do have the option of not attempting to meet their legal obligations.
Right. Become a bad actor, essentially.
There's certainly bad outcome.
Yes. So they have 3 options. So how do you tell the commission how much bonding the state of New Mexico is going to get as a result of this rulemaking?
Mr. Winchester also opined that he believes that members of his organization will walk away from their liabilities. And I wrote also that the rulemaking will create pain for some companies because companies have not systematically prepared. So if a company has 100% of their wells that qualify as defined marginal, then they're in the small minority, but they also have not made allowances for what they know to be their obligation. And if they cannot put up financial assurance If a third party deems them unable to pay, then the state is right to ask for financial assurance, and the orphaning would happen sooner, but it does not change the outcome.
It doesn't protect the taxpayer.
For that example, it accelerates the orphaning, but does not change the outcome. But that is a small sample. We can look, for example, at my exhibit 52, where I showed the number of companies that have a large percentage of more defined margin. But what the rulemaking also does is change the behavior of wells and operators, or I should say it's differently, change the financial assurance that's available from companies that are not yet completely hopeless.
So my question, though, is how do you tell the commission how much bonding is going to protect the taxpayers of the state of New Mexico from this evil if they adopt this rulemaking? I want to know how we're getting from A to B.
I think I understand your question, and you'll correct me if I miss it again. The question is relative cost and relative benefit. I have not tried to predict the behavior of every individual company, either their judgment or their ability to perform. I do observe that it applies to a large number of wells, and I have observed the ceiling of cost that it would take from the state. The ceiling is very small, and the probability of reaching that ceiling is zero. So the most likely is much, much less. Does that better answer your question?
Sorry. We'll leave it there. Let's talk about your holdback theory. You have, this is, I think you used it as a tool for analyzing, but it's in addition to, or as an alternative to traditional measures of economic measures on NPV to help measure the risk, correct?
It is no.
Okay. Can you tell me in a sentence why I'm wrong?
It is not an alternative. It is an additional measure of the contours, the nature of the cash flow.
I apologize. I thought I used the word additional or alternative, but if I didn't,
yes, additional, yes, alternative, no.
Okay. You're the sole author of, and I quote, economic yardsticks for the end of the economic life holdback and its adjuncts, correct?
At a wider scale, I'm the sole author of the idea in all contexts.
Okay.
And I should be clear that the idea is labeling a point that exists. The point does and always has exists.
And has the article that I mentioned or any other of your articles on this been peer reviewed?
No, they have not.
You mention at page 3 of your direct that you've published on the holdback concept in states such as California, Colorado, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and parts of Wyoming, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Have any of those states used the holdback concept to require single well bonding as their policy?
My analyses in all cases post-state revisions to their financial assurance requirements. So no, those analyses were just in the last couple of years. Okay.
On page 6 of your direct, lines 17 to 19, you state, I explain the surprises of late night life economics, the concept of holdback, and how they demonstrate the need for operators to have long lead plans for decommissioning their whole portfolio. That correct?
I would trust that you have read it correctly. You said page 6?
Page 6 of your direct, line 17 through 19.
Thank you. Yes, I see that.
All right. Are you suggesting that operators are surprised by the late life economics of oil and gas wells?
Yes.
Okay. And that they don't plan for decommissioning?
Yes.
All right.
I should be careful about the word operators. My point is not that all, but systematically. In my presentation of this concept to dozens of organizations, I consistently find companies, individuals surprised. And as I discuss with those companies what plans they have made for decommissioning, I have heard firsthand account of one company and secondhand accounts of 2 others that saved money in advance to be able to meet their obligations when their production ends.
You've talked in your presentation before my cross-examination of the small operators representing 0.2% of production and only 0.05% of new production. You with me? Page 50 of your rebuttal. Operators with 10 or fewer wells.
Yes.
And you also indicate on page 23 of your direct, lines 16 through 18, if 90% of the companies responsible for unplugged wells in the state were to instantly disappear, the state would only lose 2.5% of its current production and 0.3% of its production growth. I quote you accurately?
I believe you did.
Okay. I'm trying not to misquote you, so.
It's easy to read.
Do you know how many barrels of oil were produced in New Mexico January 1 through July 31 this year?
New Mexico is currently on the pace for between 700 and 750 million barrels of crude for this year.
Right, almost
Give or take.
2.2 million barrels a day or so, a little less than that.
Sounds about
according to
right.
EIA. Yep.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So by my math, multiplying, I think it's about 2.183, but that gets us to 460 million barrels. Let's call it 450 million barrels January through July, which is EIA, the last EIA data I looked at when I looked at this. With me? Okay. So 2.5% of that, 11.25 million sound accurate?
Does 2.5% of 411 million sound accurate?
450 million?
Those are, you've taken 2 numbers and put them together, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm just doing some math. Yes,
Okay.
I'm a simple guy, Mr. Purvis. You gotta,
Yeah.
sorry to slow you down, but,
So 2.5,
2.5% of 450 million.
I calculate as, you said 450.
Yep.
11 million barrels of oil.
Right. I had 11.25, but yeah.
Yes, 11.25.
All right. Times $60 a barrel. Again, sorry for the simple math.
$675 million.
Right. Do you know what the severance tax rate, combined severance tax rate in the state of New Mexico is for oil? 8.15% sound pretty good?
Yes, it sounds right in the middle.
All right. So that's about $55 million of severance tax revenue.
Yes.
Do you know that New Mexico receives about 48%, not about, exactly 48% of federal oil and gas royalty paid under the payment in lieu of taxes program?
I'm familiar with the concept, not the
Okay.
numbers.
Do you know that state royalty goes into the severance, the permanent fund?
I'm not very familiar
Okay.
with the use of the funds.
Do you know that New Mexico is about 70 state and federal minerals combined?
That's about right.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you think that $55 million in tax revenues over 7 months is a quote minute close quotation contribution towards the production and tax revenue for the state of New Mexico?
You know, if you were offering me $55 million, I would not call it minute. But the report cited by both Mr. MacArthur and Mr. McGowan represent that the oil and gas contribution to the state is in the most recent number, $14 billion. So if we double it to $100 million, and it is still by comparison, either to the overall contribution or by comparison to the value at risk, small.
Do you think it's for a state that, say, ranks dead last in public education, it's more of a call for the legislature to decide whether to forego $55 million than, and with all due respect to the 3 members of this commission?
I think that question is one beyond scope, but more importantly, a false alternative. There is a significant issue that needs to be developed, needs to be addressed. I'll leave it at that. Oh, and one other, if I just could be clear, the 2.5%, the 55 million, is a ceiling that is not a rational number. Because there's not a scenario in which 2.5% disappears. As Dr. Boomhauer addresses in his article from a economic theory standpoint and from the experience in Texas, what we see instead is that the most productive out of that 2.5% continue to exist and be produced by other people. And it's a fraction of that that stops the lowest producing of the lowest producing that ends production. So it's not 55 million that's being lost. It's some small portion of that 55 million, which is a very small portion of 14 billion.
How small a portion? Because I tried to get you to quantify this earlier and you didn't. With all due respect, you did give me answers, and I appreciate you trying. But you're telling the commission now it's a small proportion, and a small portion of it. How small?
How much?
Madam Hearing Officer, I think this is asked and answered.
Well, yes and no. Listening earlier, he was not able to quantify. Now, Mr. Cloutier is coming back around in response to his last answer, which is small portion. If there's something he can add to what he said earlier, go ahead and do that, Mr. Purvis.
I cannot quantify what portion of the 2.5% will go away in short order. I do know by analogy and first principles that it will be a small portion.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
All right, thank you very much. We need a break. Let's come back in 12 minutes. It'll be 10:40. We will turn to Mr. Suazo or Mr. Everhard.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Good morning, Mr. Purvis. I'm Miguel Suazo. I'm with Beatty and Wozniak, and I'm representing Nemoga in this proceeding. How are you today?
Thank you, Mr. Swazo, for asking. I'm doing fine.
Excellent. I want to ask you a few questions about your background to start. You've worked extensively with NGOs like Carbon Tracker, correct?
Yes.
And Carbon Tracker, as I understand what they do, advocates for stronger decommissioning rules. Is that accurate?
That's a subset of their mission.
Okay, so that's a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And you're an advocate in general for stronger regulations for oil and gas development. Is that correct?
I personally believe in the need for stronger financial protections. Yes.
Okay. Now, you disagree with Welk and the OCD on the proposed definition of marginal well. Is that right?
I don't believe that I do.
I believe in your direct testimony, page 962, lines 20 through 24, you said that you believe the word marginal refers to a financial condition, not a production rate. So you disagree with the definition based upon that statement, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, no, you're misunderstanding. The generic term does mean low profit. That concept has been codified in the proposal, but I do believe the general concept encompasses a lot more wells than the definition as proposed.
Okay. So to better understand that, I guess you would agree that a well by well analysis is more accurate for determining whether a well is marginal. Is that right? Versus a lease-based assessment for marginality.
That logic doesn't follow. I don't think I understand what you mean.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get at is you think marginal is an economic concept, not a production concept. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. In my understanding of the term in general use, it is an economic concept.
Okay. So you interpret OCD.
Mr. Swath, let me clarify at one point. There are a lot of regulations or tax incentives mostly that describe marginal wells with a capital M as a defined term based purely on rate. There are tax incentives at state and national levels queued to rates of normally 10 or 15 barrel of oil equivalent per day. There certainly are other instances in which the word marginal is strictly a production measure.
Okay. And so you interpret, just to follow up on that, OCD's and Welk's proposed marginal well definition as consisting of two criteria, which are volume and time?
Yes.
Okay. And so you agree that this definition is less effective than requiring financial assurance earlier in the well's life cycle. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think it would be more effective for the state to require financial assurance earlier.
Okay. Forgive me, I'm trying to make sure I'm not asking you questions that Mr. Cloutier might have already covered. So bear with me as I'm going to kind of work through the topics I want to touch on with you.
Take your time.
Let's talk a little bit about your use of Vertex's cost estimates. You estimated in your direct testimony that the total cost for upstream oil and gas infrastructure decommissioning in New Mexico to be approximately $22 billion. Is that accurate?
I cited the The nearly 5-year-old report by Vertex for that number.
Okay. And at the time that Vertex commissioned the report, as I understand it, there was a range in that value of minus 30% to plus 50%. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the accuracy range that they assigned to their estimate.
Okay. And you would agree that that minus 30 plus 50% is a pretty widely variable range, right?
30% and 50% are too broad to sign a contract for that number. It is not too broad for strategic planning. They are broad numbers, but they're suitable for purpose. And I'll also point out it's conservative. If it's 50% probability, it's higher for a 5-year-old estimate.
Vertex. You just sent them. So in your SIR rebuttal, you said that the Vertex data might be imprecise, but that it is not inaccurate. As I understand what you said, imprecision is inherently at least a bit inaccurate. Can you please further elaborate on what you meant?
Sure. Precision and accuracy are two different measures of quality. Precision has to do with how exact it is, and accuracy is how close it is to reality. The standards for cost estimation, including the taxonomy, prescribes how those parameters are defined. And Vertex is a company active in remediation and plugging practice in the state of New Mexico and familiar with cost estimation. I have no reason to think that they have not appropriately estimated those costs, such that if we did in March of 2021 estimate down to a bid level, down to a class 2 or 3 estimate, there should be a 90% probability that it would fall within the range it defined, in which case it is accurate, but not precise.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because in your direct, you're using the 2021 Vertex cost estimates, and you're using that to say that the total orphan well costs across the state can range from 15 billion on the low side and 33 billion on the higher side. Is that right?
No, I'm saying that the end of the life of the oil industry in New Mexico will cost tens of billions of dollars, and that needs to be planned for. My testimony was not an attempt to translate that number to specifically how much will fall on the state, on the taxpayers of the state.
Okay. So using the Vertex estimates, are they, I guess they're not particularly current at this point since it's 2025, and you're saying they're not precise, but they're useful as a planning tool?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
If I may,
Sure.
You saw on my exhibit about the way costs have changed, that costs in fact have gone up significantly since 2021. When they were preparing their report in early 21, it was close on the heels of a dramatic reduction in costs during COVID across the industry as a whole. So if I bring that forward 5 years to now, I would expect the number to be significantly higher than the 22 billion.
Okay. And the Vertex figures that you use in your testimony provide estimates for full pipeline removal, which is something that's separate from plugging and associated costs, correct?
Yes, they provide separately a cost estimate for decommissioning of the current midstream industry in the state under 2 scenarios.
Okay. And the range provided by Vertex for these costs is between 3.4 and 20.3 billion. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't characterize it that way.
Okay.
They have 2 different assessments, 2 alternative scenarios, each with separate ranges of uncertainty.
Okay.
One scenario is the pipelines are entirely removed. The other is that they're abandoned in place, but in either event, it's midstream and not relevant to upstream oil and gas we're talking about today.
Okay, but how are we to know what costs are included with the 3.4 billion compared to the 20.3 billion? I guess as I understand it, the higher end includes removal of pipelines and all associated infrastructure, and the 3.4 billion includes what?
Abandonment in place.
Okay, sir.
Now, and I know that because I read it in the report, but abandonment of midstream assets is not my strong suit.
Okay, understood. I just want to make sure we're talking about these numbers with some context and,
Yes.
and understanding. So I
We can agree
appreciate
on that context.
Now I'd like to talk a little bit about page 4 of your demonstrative exhibit. And you say there that Welk's proposals would only apply to 11% of the 22 billion upstream estimate and only 24% of the 9.8 billion decommissioning liability estimate. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, which exhibit are you talking about?
I'm sorry, page 4 of your demonstrative exhibits that were filed on October 15th. We can pull it up for you. Sorry, I thought it was my fault. I didn't tell you.
It's the Vertex exhibit, originally submitted as Exhibit 34.
I have it in my list as Purvis demonstrative exhibit page 4. I don't know if that's how Welk labeled it in their submissions elsewhere.
It's applicant's exhibit 34.
I haven't. Yes, thank you. Would you ask the question again?
Sure. So this is exhibit states that Welk's proposals would only apply to 11% of the 22 billion upstream estimate. Is that right?
Yes.
And only 24% of the 9.8 billion decommissioning liability estimate.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And those estimated costs are 1 billion and 1.4 billion respectively. Is that right?
1 billion on private lands and 1.4 billion on state lands as of March 2021.
Okay.
Yes.
So that just seems broad to me. It, you know, as a layperson that doesn't traffic in these numbers as much as somebody like yourself, it just kind of seems like those numbers are essentially provided almost for shock value as opposed to accuracy. Is that a fair characterization?
No.
Well, I just think that seems like an especially high number based upon the data that you've said is, you know, inaccurate, not inaccurate, but imprecise, which leads to the broad range in costs that we're putting in front of the commission to think about as they consider this problem.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question, Mr. Suazo.
So I guess what I'm getting at here is the assumptions behind these numbers. Are they disclosed or explicitly broken down somewhere to help us understand how Vertex calculated its costs?
Yes, as I said in my rebuttal, the report's 91 pages long, has 31 tables of data and 4 appendices. It's explained in depth.
But that's your explanation, not Vertex's, right?
No, the Vertex report.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about your 91-page report.
My report was long,
Yes.
but no, the Vertex report is 91 pages long.
Okay, and did you have any insight into how Vertex, actually, I think Mr. Cloutier covered that. Let me move on. Okay, we're gonna stay on Vertex. And Vertex is a decommissioning contractor in the state of New Mexico. Is that right?
Among other things, yes.
Okay. So they essentially could stand to benefit from increased orphan well P&A work in this state.
Yes.
Okay. No. Yeah. Mr. Purvis, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, what went into your testimony. Do you know how many times you cited yourself in your testimony?
I do not know. Would you please
Does 10
humble?
sound about right in your direct?
10 sounds about right.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Now, how many of the self-cited sources listed in your testimony are peer-reviewed?
Between my rebuttal testimony and my direct testimony, I'd estimate 10 or 15 papers are peer reviewed.
Or peer-reviewed? And are any of them industry reviewed?
Besides my own? No, my papers are not, that I've cited are not peer reviewed. And no, all of the papers that I've cited do not come from the Society of Petroleum Engineers. They come from economics and other kinds of journals.
Okay. Mr. Purvis, could we ask you to please turn to Exhibit 54, page 825? We'll give your counsel or you a chance to get there.
Hold on just a second. Or you're welcome to display it.
54. 825. We can pull it up on the screen if
Please
that's
do. Thank you.
faster. And if I could trouble you to read the first two sentences of the first paragraph that is highlighted or will be highlighted in just a second.
Thank you. That's why I couldn't find it. I was looking for a graphic. I do see the SPE paper that I wrote about holdback. Which two sentences would you like for me to read?
The first two, please.
Traditional economic measures use chiefly net present value.
Nope, sorry, above that.
This paper was selected for presentation by an SPE program committee following review of information contained in an abstract submitted by the author. Contents of the paper have not been reviewed by the Society of Petroleum Engineers and are subject to correction by the author. The material does not necessarily reflect any position of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, its officers, or members.
Thank you. So this particular paper that you rely upon is not reviewed by SPE?
Only so far as the program committee reviewed the abstract.
Okay.
In this first publication.
How many of the sources that you use in your testimony are opinion pieces or guest editorials or business development marketing types of materials? You don't have to have a precise number, just more or less.
I don't know.
And are any of the materials that you use, that you cite in your testimony, are they used as materials to attract customers to Purvis Energy Advisors?
There is one that I've cited, the white paper that I published on my website before I published at the convention here.
Okay.
And it was published on my website along with other studies. I did not and do not expect it to win many clients.
So I guess by citing yourself, are you essentially, telling the commission that your testimony is credible because you've previously said the same thing based upon your own work?
It would be nice to think that my name had that much authority. I do not believe that's the case. The credibility, I think the idea should be evaluated on its own merits. The citations allow for a fuller discussion of the ideas.
Fair enough. So I guess that takes us back to holdback, which I'd like to better understand. Now, holdback, as I understand it, it's an alternative to traditional economic measures. I think you said NPV and ROI.
Not an alternative, an additional measure.
Okay. And you're the sole author of the article titled Economic Yardsticks for the End of Economic Life, Holdback and Its Adjuncts. Is that correct?
You're talking about the one we still have on the screen, Exhibit 54? Yes, I am the sole author.
Okay. And so with regard to the holdback approach and your view on net revenues, you state that by the time the net revenues at normal prices are only twice as much as monthly costs, a well is within striking distance of its economic limit, correct?
That's a rule of thumb described, yes.
Okay. And this is not a formal or industry recognized threshold at this time, correct?
No. That's a personal rule of thumb based on doing reserves since 95.
Over decades of your own evaluations. Okay.
Just a rule of thumb.
So no states have adopted this holdback theory? Is that the right thing to call it?
Don't think theory is the right word. But the concept of holdback has not been endogenized in any formal sense that I know of since it was published in the fall of 22.
Did you use in your testimony and in the figures that you provided to the commission and is any industry valuation data like ROI or payout methods in addition to your holdback method, just for comparison?
I'm sorry, I don't think I followed the question, Mr. Swasville. Again?
Did you not use valid industry valuation data like return on investment?
So holdback is a variation of return on investment.
Okay.
But I didn't do any economic evaluation at all. I showed an exhibit, the holdback exhibit, a sample cash flow.
Okay. Just have one more question because I think Mr. Cloutier covered most of the topics. In your SIR rebuttal, you discussed how Hannigan misconstrued his website. Is that one?
I don't, how he misconstrued my website?
No, sorry, I'm trying to understand this question myself.
Okay, at least, thank you, Tyler.
I'm not following. All right, I think it's going to add more confusion than clarity. No further questions for Namoga for Mr. Purvis on cross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swaza. Let's see, Ms. Bradfield or Mr. Sayer? Questions? Okay, Mr. Sayer indicated no questions. Mr. Rankin for Oxy.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Purvis?
I can. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. So yesterday, Mr. Alexander identified you as the applicant's witness who will be the expert testifying on the financial assurance aspects of the proposed rule. Is that correct?
Yes, I heard that testimony.
You agree?
Certainly had a lot of topics on, yes.
Okay, so you're the applicant witness who's the expert on the financial assurance aspects of this proposed rule?
I'm not sure I'm the only one, but that's certainly an emphasis of my testimony.
Okay. So at page 5 of your testimony, and I'll go ahead and pull this up. Here on page 5 of your testimony where I've highlighted, you explain how the proposed rules are designed.
Is that rebuttal or?
I'm sorry, this is direct testimony.
Direct.
Yeah. In your direct testimony, explain how the proposed rules are designed to motivate operators to have and execute a plan for decommissioning before the revenue from the well production is insufficient to cover the cost, correct? That's the first sentence I've highlighted.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the proposed rules are set up to use financial assurance then to help achieve that purpose, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And then you go on to say the next sentence here that I've highlighted, that the rules are necessary because the nature of oil and gas economics, together with New Mexico's existing rules, create little obligation to ensure operators are planning for decommissioning. I'm paraphrasing generally, but that's a correct reflection of your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you go on to say, and because existing incentives favor delaying decommissioning and ultimately increase the risk of orphaning, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the proposed rules are set up then to increase the obligations on operators to ensure that the operators plan to decommission their wells, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the increase you reference in the testimony I've highlighted are the obligations, rather the increase that you reference would be the increase in the financial assurance obligations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the proposed rules there.
The same may be true of other things. The same may be true of other provisions.
Sure. I mean, it's at least part, right?
Yes.
Right. And maybe a principal part of the rule, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question. FA is certainly a principal part of the proposal.
Right. And the increased incentives that you reference also would be the increased financial assurance, correct?
That's one of the incentives, yes.
Right. Okay. All right. So in other words, just to be clear, what I understand from this testimony is that the financial assurance is a large part, a principal part of the rule's purpose to motivate operators to plan for decommissioning and then also to not delay decommissioning, correct?
Yes, that's the way I understand it.
Okay. And looking at your Exhibit 38 from your PowerPoint slide 10 from your demonstratives that discusses the holdback. My understanding is then that this whole, what the purpose here would be to encourage or motivate operators to decommission within that holdback period, correct?
No.
Okay. What is the purpose of urging them to decommissioning? What point? Is it up to them to decide?
I don't believe there's anything in the design intended to affect the timing of when it happens, merely that it does happen at the operator's expense instead of the public expense.
Well, you just told me that the intent is to have it be decommissioned sooner, correct?
I don't remember saying sooner, but the sooner than has been the case because it was sitting for long periods of time in inactive status.
Okay. The testimony you provided was that you wanted to incentivize operators to not delay decommissioning, correct?
Yes, not to delay.
Right. And so the inverse of that would be to do it sooner, correct?
No,
No.
only to the extent that companies are artificially delaying now.
All right. So, so you're not saying, your testimony is not that the purpose of this rule is to have operators plug their wells sooner than they otherwise would.
My testimony is that it should be done in a timely manner, without artificial delay. To the extent that there is artificial delay, yes, sooner.
And the financial assurance that's proposed under this rule is designed to make that happen, correct?
That's the hope.
Yeah. Okay. So the last part here I wanted to point out is at the bottom of this same page, I've highlighted a sentence here. You say that the applicants offer a conservative but effective approach to limit the state's financial exposure in a way that will have little impact on overall oil and gas production in the state, correct?
Yes, you've read it correctly.
And that's still your position, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to jump in and discuss the financial assurance issue. I'm first going to go to the proposed changes to the active wells provision in the rules. I've got up here on the slide 12 of your demonstrative proposed modifications to 1915-8-9C. And then just here, looking at the first portion of the modifications of the rule here is that you're proposing to increase the one well plugging bond to $150,000, correct?
I'm not proposing, but the proposal is.
Okay,
to
so
increase to 150.
Applicant's proposal is to increase that, make that change, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next modification here is to the statewide blanket bond, modifying it from a tiered approach to essentially no tiering, where all operators with 2 or more active wells can elect to pay a blanket bond of $250,000, correct?
I don't think they can elect. I think they're obligated, but otherwise, yes.
I guess it would make no sense, but if they wanted to, they could go out and have single well bonds for all their wells, correct?
I guess you could do anything above the minimum that's required.
Right. So so it's really at their election to get a blanket bond, correct?
No, I think the provision requires them to have a blanket bond as a minimum and leaves open the option for more assurance if they want it.
And the operator, a rational operator would elect to choose the blanket bond, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, and referring back to your testimony on this topic, okay, in your direct, this is page 38 of your direct, where you review these changes, okay? At the bottom of this page, you note that in discussing the effect or the effect of this change and the implications of it, you state that, however, the Oil and Gas Act statutory cap of $250,000 for blanket bonding means that the single well financial assurance requirement will not have wide effect, as most wells reside in large company portfolios of 400 wells or more, thus qualifying for the blanket bond. I read that correctly?
You have read it correctly, and I think that I wrote it imprecisely. What I was trying to say was that most companies are going to fall under the blanket bond.
Simply because they have multiple wells, right?
Yes.
And multiple active wells, thus allowing them to elect, rather than pay single well bonds for each of those wells, to be covered by the blanket bond, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the issue here is that the statute caps that at $250,000, correct?
As I understand the law, yes.
No matter how many active wells they have, right?
As I understand the law, but I haven't studied the law as such.
But that's the issue, right? No matter how many active wells they have, they only have to pay $250,000 to get financial assurance, correct? To cover all those wells.
That's the way I understand it, with the caveat that I'm not sure how it applies differently to active or inactive wells.
Very well. So I'm just talking about active wells. So for operators that have multiple active wells, they only have to pay $250,000 to obtain financial assurance for all those wells, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
But under this provision alone.
very well. And the statute that you're referencing is this statute 70-2-14, correct? And I've highlighted here the language that provides for the blanket bond in green. Have you reviewed that statute?
I have not, Mr. Rankin.
Okay. So you're not familiar with what the I mean, when you, in your testimony, in your direct testimony, second sentence here that I've highlighted, these rules are necessary because the nature of oil and gas economics in concert with New Mexico's existing rules create little obligation that ensures operators are planning for decommissioning and so on. So you cite to what the existing rules are, but you didn't familiarize yourself with what the existing statutory regulatory framework was that create those rules.
Enough to draw that conclusion, but not enough to interpret the law.
Okay, so you didn't review what the statute is or what it provides for as part of your preparation or review or recommendations to the commission on what should be done.
No, what I made no analysis of the legal language. I did observe that the current bonding is a very small proportion and does not address the judgment proof problem.
Okay, going back to your testimony, this is back to page 38 of your direct. You wanted to say that the effect of the $250,000 blanket bond means that the single well financial assurance in the rule, which requires
I'm sorry,
$150,000.
on page 38, please remind me what line you're reading at?
I'm summarizing.
Oh,
Okay, I'm summarizing. In your testimony in this section, you testify that you state that the effect of the $250,000 blanket bond means that the single well financial assurance in the proposed rule, which would require $150,000 for every one well plugging bond, will not have wide effect, correct?
I think my testimony is that 1915 HC does not have much effect.
Yeah, I mean, the issue there is, as we were just discussing, right, is because operators have the option to elect when they have multiple active wells to obtain financial assurance under the blanket bond provision, right, of $250,000, correct?
Yes.
And that's why it won't have wide effect, right? Because that $250,000 isn't going to cover the multiple wells that they may have if they
Yes,
don't.
$250,000 is not much money considering the size of the portfolios.
Okay. And the point being that $250,000 based on your cost estimates is not even going to cover two wells, right?
Based on my analysis of other people's actual costs, it's not going to cover any.
Right. But there's another way, right, to get more financial assurance that targets more wells and more operators across the state, and that's to create a new category of wells that targets marginal wells, correct?
There are three other provisions that trigger single well and a fourth that triggers portfolio level.
And I'm talking now here about the proposal under the rule to create this new category of marginal wells, correct?
Yes.
And that proposal is intended to broaden the scope of wells that are required to get additional financial assurance under the rule, correct?
Yes, it does do
Okay.
that.
And that's the intent, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise you're stuck with $250,000 for a blanket bond or single well bonds of 150, right?
Right.
And that's not addressing the problem that you've identified.
Yeah, yes.
So then I'm going to go to slide 13 in your PowerPoint, which is the overview of the proposal to create this marginal well and inactive well financial assurance category, correct?
1 second, I'm getting there.
I've got it on the screen too, so
Oh,
you can see
sorry.
it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to direct you so we get to it real fast. Okay.
Thank you.
So here on slide 13 of your demonstrative, this outlines your proposal to amend the financial assurance provisions to include this new category of marginal wells and inactive wells, correct?
Inactive pre-exists.
But as to the
yes,
financial
marginal.
assurance, though, I mean, yeah, okay, but very well, it does exist. You're right. But this is a new provision in the rule, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the first thing here is the definition of the marginal well that the applicants are proposing, right?
Yes.
And then the very next aspect of the financial assurance provision provides that a transferee, the one receiving wells, has to provide a one well financial assurance of $150,000 for each marginal well prior to transfer, correct? It's under part 1, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's one way of addressing the issues, to make sure that operators, if they're going to transfer these wells, that the recipient actually is bonded and has the economic financial assurance in place to protect the state, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next provision, starting in January 2028, and this is under subparagraph 2, operators then are required to provide a one well plugging bond for each marginal well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And even though marginal wells are active wells, operators would not be able to then rely on or elect a blanket bond to cover any marginal wells anymore, correct?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question, and I'm not sure how. It sounds like an interpretation, a legal interpretation of the way the rules work together.
Well, isn't the purpose to prevent operators from relying on a blanket bond so they actually have more financial assurance to cover all their wells?
The purpose is to protect the state, to provide financial assurance to protect the state.
You can't tell me whether operators are going to be prohibited from electing to obtain a blanket bond under this new provision?
I have given that no thought, Mr.
Really?
Rankin.
So if I'm an operator and I have more than, let me ask you this then. If I'm an operator, I have more than 15% wells that are marginal, okay? And I have a portfolio of 400 wells, and I got 15% that are marginal. Can I still elect to put my active non-marginal wells under a blanket bond?
I suppose,
Madam Hieronymus, eject and calls for a legal conclusion.
Yeah, Mr. Rankin, would you ask it in a way that doesn't call for a legal?
I'm sorry, this is his slide. He's proposing these rules. I'm trying to understand what the effect of them are going to be. He's the witness.
Right, I understand. Providing testimony about mostly financial matters. Mr. Purvis, can you answer the question without answering it as a legal conclusion?
well, the only thing I would clarify is that the rules are not, as written, are not mine. I did not write them. I have said that they would be effective and should be adopted.
Okay, so you can't tell me as you're sitting here what the effect of this rule would be on operators who have more than 15% marginal wells in their portfolio, whether they would be obligated to or no longer able to elect a blanket bond for their remaining active wells.
I do not know the interaction between the two provisions that you're talking about.
Who among Welk's witnesses would be able to answer that question?
I do not know.
Okay. So if I'm just looking, and I'm just going to read the plain language of the rule, okay? I'm going to look at this subparagraph 3, and I'll read it out loud. An operator with 15% or more of their wells in marginal or inactive well status, or a combination thereof, shall not at discretion, but shall provide a one well plugging financial assurance in the amount of $150,000 for each well registered to the operator until the percentage of the operator's marginal and inactive wells is decreased below 15%. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir.
So just understanding the plain language of that provision that applicants are proposing, that's part of your testimony. What's your understanding of what the effect of that provision would be on whether an operator would have the ability to elect, after this is adopted, a blanket bond for its remaining active wells that are not marginal?
Madam Hearing Officer, I believe that was asked and answered.
Mr. Purvis, have you answered that already?
I believe I have.
Well, I'm asking him now specifically about this provision to help me understand what it means. As the witness who's testifying to it, who's proposed this, or presenting this as part of the applicant's proposal, I'm trying to understand what it means for the industry.
Do you have anything to add to your earlier answer?
The only thing I could say is that I assume that the operator could have both, but I do not know the way that the statutes or the regulations rather would interact.
Madam Hearing Officer, we have a legal expert to follow who is in a better position to answer some of these questions.
All right, thank you. Is that Mr. Morgan? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Who was it? Mr. Borg. Okay. Mr. Purvis, because you're not familiar with how this rule would actually operate, I'm going to be able to eliminate a substantial portion of my questions for you.
It's a win-win.
No, it's not a win-win. It's not a win-win. However, you will have a shorter cross-examination from me. All right, I'm going to talk about impacts. Mr. Cloutier did address some of this with you, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper. Going back to your testimony direct, we talked about this briefly at the outset, and he queried you on this. Short that your belief is that in proportion to the risk or mitigation of the risk, that the impact on oil and gas production is going to be small, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this slide here in your demonstrative, slide 28 from your exhibit 52, shows that at the 15% threshold that we were just discussing, right, about, there's a threshold, once you reach 15%, then operators are going to have to do something, and you can't tell me what that is, or whether they can continue to use a blanket bond or what. But at 15%, once they have 15% marginal wells in their portfolio, something happens in the rule. And this is intended to show what the effect of that is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The ceiling effect.
The ceiling effect. Okay. And looking at this, you see a big drop off, right? Once for companies that have portfolios of 15% or more marginal wells, that sort of drops off, right? There's generally fewer companies that have 15% or more marginal wells in their portfolio, right?
I think what you're saying is the same thing I observe between the third and fourth bin. There's a step change down. Yes.
Okay, but nevertheless, when I look at your table at 15%, that's still 51% of all the operators in the state would be impacted by that threshold, correct?
51% of the legal entities, 51% of the operating companies, yes.
Do you know how many that would be?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Okay. And at that 15%, it's about a little less than 20% of the total wells in the state, correct?
Correct.
And then on the far right column, you've got 2.3% BOE, which I understand to be barrels of oil equivalent, right?
Correct.
And just to be clear, I mean, I think there's two places in your on the slide where you use the number 2.5%. So I don't know if it's 2.3, 2.5. That's the difference between precision and accuracy, right? Either way, it's accurate, but it's not quite precise, right?
That's a typo, and I apologize.
That's okay. So I'll just use 2.3%.
Thank you.
Okay. So now this chart right here is based off of 2024 production in New Mexico, correct? That's
Correct.
my understanding, right? And so we see that the 15% threshold will have an impact on 51% of the companies that operate in the state, hundreds, right?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, do you know, I mean, how many, Mr. Cloutier was asking about the master orphan well spreadsheet that was part of your analysis. How many operators, different legal entities are on that master orphan well spreadsheet?
I don't recall.
Is it hundreds?
No.
Is it dozens?
Closer to dozens and hundreds, but I don't remember the number.
But if I were to pull that up, I could look at it and see how many operators are actually implicated in that master orphan well spreadsheet.
Yes.
But it's not hundreds, right?
It's not hundreds.
It's not 51% of the operators in the state, right?
Correct.
Okay. So now we talked about this at the outset. The proposed rules are set up to increase the incentives not to delay decommissioning wells during the operating life, correct?
I believe that's what we read before.
Right. And that's your testimony, right?
Not to artificially delay.
Right. So and then on the far right, we talked about these 2.3%, but you don't tell us what those volumes are, right? You just say it's a small percentage of the total production.
That's correct.
So Mr. Cloutier was asking about 2025 production. I pulled this down last night. I went to the OCD's website and I pulled down the most recent production values for total production in the state. You see there's a column H that has total gas. Okay. There's a column N that has total oil. Okay. And I'm going to scroll down almost to the bottom because I'm going to look at 2024 because that's what's on your chart. Okay. Oh, that was 1994. What was I doing? 2004. Man, I'm 20 years off. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So column H again is the gas column. Okay. And column N is the oil column. I'm not going to bother doing the conversion of barrels of oil equivalent for gas, but I think it's about 6,000 cubic feet, something like that is the conversion.
That's the standard conversion. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to bother with that. Okay. But I'm just going to focus on oil like Mr. Cloutier did. Okay. So if I go over to the oil column and I look at the total production for the state for 2024, that was 740 million barrels, right?
Yes.
And that matches with what the LC reported and it's on track within the range of what's you predict for 2025, right?
Yeah. I estimated 700 to 750 million.
Okay. And again, just to get these numbers out there, I ran, you can see my calculation. I took that value, I multiplied it times 2.3%, and I get 17 million barrels, right?
Yes.
And that's nothing to sniff at, right?
Again, I would not object if someone gave me 17 million barrels.
And I'm not even including the barrel of oil equivalent for the gas, right? To get what the total impact of your proposed of the applicant's proposed rule will have, right?
Correct.
I'm just looking at oil here. And so 2.3% of the oil portion of this production is 17 million barrels, right?
That's the math.
Okay. And then I actually picked the same number that Mr. Cloutier did because I looked at the current price of oil and it's around 60, it's a little below this now, but around $60 a barrel. So the value of that oil from last year that would be impacted under your analysis is over $1 billion, right?
That's the math.
That's the math. It's a big number. Okay. So, and that's not even including the value of the natural gas, which, you know, as we all know, is not as valuable as the oil. Nevertheless, that's just the oil portion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as you testified to Mr. Cloutier, that that's the high end, right? You're saying that 2.3%, 2.5%, that $1 billion is not going to just go away, right?
Correct.
But some fraction of it is,
Yes,
and you don't know what it is, right?
correct.
You haven't done an analysis to determine what portion of that 2.3% that's going to be impacted by this rule is going to no longer be in existence, right?
I have not quantified it. I have made a directional analysis.
Okay. It's going to be down, right? Up or down, down, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, okay. So you haven't done any kind of study to determine whether the proposed rule will ultimately result in a reduction in ultimate recovery across the state, have you? Other than it's going to go down, right?
There are competing factors that some of which may drive production up and some of which may drive production down. I have made an analysis of the effect of the standard economic model of economic limit on how that would change the economic life of wells under the rules. Please excuse me for just a second. I can't see Mr. Rankin.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm in the back row. But you haven't done a study to determine what the volumes of reduction in ultimate recovery would be from adoption of this rule, have you?
I have not done any analysis consistent with the type of work on the exhibit we were just looking at. But I did, as I said, make an analysis of how it would affect economic limit.
And what's your answer on that?
It will change the economic limit for most wells between about 1 and 3 months in the idealized model that we use.
Okay. So then you also haven't conducted an analysis to determine what the financial impact would be on operators or wells that generate that 2.3% of the statewide production, right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Sure. In other words, as a result of imposing additional financial assurance on companies, right? There's going to be some financial impact on those operators who produce that 2.3% of the volumes of the state we're looking at, right?
Yes.
And you have not conducted any sort of analysis of the financial impact on those companies to determine how it would affect their ability to continue to produce that 2.3% of oil in the state, have you?
I believe that's fair.
Right? Okay. Now you've on the slide 35 in your demonstratives, you showed us sort of this concept about weighing costs and benefits, right?
Yes, I did.
But you didn't do any kind of study to determine whether any potential reduction in ultimate recovery or financial impacts on operators would be offset by any potential economic benefits derived from the increased financial assurance, did you?
I did not make a prediction of what the net gain is. I did observe that the cost is minimal and the protection, the issue being protected is much larger.
Or even that there is a net gain. Did you do an analysis to show us that there's a net gain?
I did not predict what the new bonding level would be.
Because we don't even know what the net loss would be, right? So we can't say what the net, if there is even a net gain, right?
I don't think that's a fair statement.
Okay. So you feel like in your opinion, there is a net gain?
Yes.
But you can't tell me what it is.
I have not quantified it.
Okay. So as sitting as the commissioners before you, or even the operators, the public, I have no way of knowing whether there's a net gain or not, because it's just your opinion, right?
No, I've quantified the magnitude of both, and they're different orders of magnitude.
Okay. Well, we just looked at the $1 billion of that is the value of the 2.3% from 2024, and you can't tell me what percentage of that is going to be impacted, right?
Correct.
And so that's a value, and I don't know how much of that value is going to be impacted, do I?
I have not specified and not quantified that.
Okay. So I can't know whether your opinion about that there's a net benefit is accurate or not, right?
I continue to disagree. I believe that the analysis of the magnitude of the issue being addressed, the magnitude of assurance that would be created by comparison to the loss is a net gain to the public.
So because you haven't done an analysis to determine whether there's going to be, or as I understand it, actually, there's probably going to be a net reduction in ultimate recovery. You're not able to testify today that this proposed rule will prevent waste.
I have not drawn an opinion about the effect on waste. As I understand, waste is a legal concept.
Okay, so, well, it's also an engineering concept, right? I mean, isn't an engineer, one of the engineering purposes out there is to not waste, right? Is to maximize recovery, do it in an economic way, right? It's also it's an industry term, right?
It is a term that we talk about, although it has, like marginal, has both legal and industry application, although the majority of the application is legal.
Okay. So just to confirm, you didn't do an analysis to say one way or the other whether this rule would be able to prevent waste, right?
I did draw a couple of opinions I think are relevant. First is that waste is not an economic concept. It's a volumetric concept.
Okay, so in the engineering side,
use and the engineering side, thank you,
okay,
Mr. Rankin, yes.
so you're not commenting on that on the legal side, but under New Mexico law, what the commission's rules, how the commission rules guide the commission to consider waste, right?
Right.
But you're just saying on the engineering side.
But I that's correct. And I also did opine that as I said a minute ago, the change in ultimate recovery would be minute, and that there are competing forces that might cause ultimate recovery to be higher. I also find that the change does not make premature end of production because the word premature is a value judgment, and it seems to me that fully more secure, financially responsible operations does not make it premature.
Okay, but the challenge here is putting consideration of risk of taking on orphan wells and the economic liability of orphan wells versus the commission's obligation to prevent waste, right? There's some balancing that has to occur between those two competing interests, right?
Yeah, and as I understand the charge of the commission, it is to balance correlative rights, waste, and environmental and public interest.
To balance or to prevent waste? You don't know, that's not your expertise, is it?
Yeah, I'm gonna just object to the speculation on the legal nature of the question.
Okay, so I'll move on to my last couple of questions then. Okay, so we've discussed a fair bit about whether or not you can actually quantify what the impact is and whether it's a net benefit or not. Okay, and you continue to take the position that you believe it is a net benefit, but with the values here and being unable to quantify them, I remain unconvinced. Okay, so we'll move on from that. I'm going to go back to your slide 28. And I'm going to look at this again, and you provided some helpful additional other brackets, okay, to consider impacts of other portfolio mixes. Okay, if I were to look at this table in your exhibit here, so the rule is focused on 15%, right, of a portfolio mix of marginal wells and other active wells, right?
The rule says 15% marginal and inactive.
And inactive,
yes,
right. But you've also provided a sort of overview of what the impact might look like if we looked at different percentages of those two wells, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when we get up to a higher mix, like 30% or more, all of a sudden you're dropping down below 1%, correct?
That's correct.
1% of the barrels of oil equivalent production impacted, right?
The table on my exhibit 52 reads that if threshold of 30% marginal and inactive instead of a threshold of 15% impacts the extreme limit of 0.6%.
And as well, it's a smaller number of, or smaller fraction of operators in the state, correct?
Yes, sir.
33% instead of 51%. What is do you have any idea how many operators 33% represents?
Around 100, maybe a little bit more.
So not hundreds, but 100, right?
Legal entities, yes.
Smaller impact, and a much smaller impact on the barrels of oil equivalent.
You're reading that correctly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Rankin, you have about 5 minutes.
Perfect. Oh, okay. I'm not going to be able to pull it up right now to go through it, but if I told you that my understanding is that for your spreadsheet, for the master orphan well spreadsheet, it's fewer than 20 operators. Would that surprise you?
I thought I would have expected a little bit more, but I would accept your representation.
Okay. And that's a lot fewer than the hundreds under the 15% that are going to be impacted under the proposed rule, right?
The historical pace of orphaning is less than can be expected in the future.
So your view is that it's going to be there's going to be more of these folks on that list.
I believe all the evidence points to that. Yes.
Okay, but that hasn't been the case, right? I mean, it's still. I mean, it remains to be seen. There's only 14 operators, or fewer than 20 on that list, right? Of orphaned wells.
The master orphan well spreadsheet includes only those operators who have already endured enforcement action, and it includes 1,800 wells. The list of wells already prepared, ready for enforcement action, but not yet enforced because of lack of resources, is approximately double that currently. Well, what it appears to be here, and I know nationally, is that the population of orphan wells today is larger than the population of all wells that have ever been plugged by orphan well programs over the decades that they have existed. Meanwhile, as my work shows, the pace of decommissioning, well, I haven't done the pace of decommissioning here, but the very large population, tens of thousands of wells, are standing on the edge of economic viability as it stands.
Well, no further questions. Thank you very much, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rankin. Mr. Maxwell, do you have questions of Mr. Purvis?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Ms. Nanasi is on the platform, but I'll ask. No. All right. Mr. Moore for State Land Office. Mr. Tremaine, do you have questions?
I do have a couple questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thank you.
If I may, if we're going to be more than just a couple of minutes, I could sure use a break now rather than later.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be about 10 minutes, but I think we should take a break.
All right. Well, it is lunchtime then, though. So let's break for lunch and come back a little bit before 1.
Thank you.